Where does courage come from for you?
I think my mom's ancestral side is I don't know, they probably had a kingdom at some point.
Badass women?
The badass women.
To celebrate turning 60 this year, I chatted with women of all ages about their biggest life transitions. I'm Melinda French Gates, and these are the moments that make us. So thanks for being with me, Megan. I'm doing a series of interviews because I'm about to turn 60, and which feels like a big transition in life to me.
Yeah.
And you're still in your 30s, but you've gone through some significant transitions, and so I'd love to talk about that today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So talk to me about your 30s compared to your 20s. Like when you think about those two decades, how have they been different, or how have they been also the same a little bit?
I mean, I feel like they've been drastically different, drastically the same. I thought I knew one thing, I knew nothing, thought I knew everything. I think in my 20s, it's just like a fire hose of, your life and information and going to school and graduating and, my career kind of taking off and, sort of dipping my toe into activism and just sort of, I think, getting out of home and that safety net gone a little bit, and especially leaving college, it was like, who am I and who do I want to be, and sort of figuring that out. In my 30s, I was like, oh yeah, I totally know who I want to be, and having a little bit more sense, but also life is gonna life on you. So yeah, just trying to take it all in a little bit more. And now I think as I'm getting closer to my 40s, I'll be 39 this summer, I'm like, oh, I know nothing. Okay, now I really know nothing, and now it's time to really learn what life is about.
It's humbling when you hit that point, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. I remember thinking at 20 or 21, I just knew everything, and my parents knew nothing.
Oh,
I was like, how could, and then the older I got, I was like, I realized the less I knew, actually. Okay, so you've had a major transition in the last 18 months from professional athlete with this amazing career and now really flipping more towards activism. Talk about that transition. Did you prepare for it? Did you know it was coming? What was it like, and how did you navigate that?
I think I was a little bit prepared for it. I think playing as long as I did for, it sort of well into my late 30s, really since I was kind of 35, I was like, okay, it's coming at some point. I'm obviously not gonna play forever. And I've always found so much of my identity off the field, so much in activism, so much in other things in my family. So I was hoping that was gonna, bode well for me. But I think at the end, being able to watch, my partner Sue go through her retirement, obviously in Seattle, and, just being such an iconic person in Seattle, but to see her and really go through it with her of, just the conversations, the processing around, do I even want to be done? And okay, this is going to be the final season. This is how I want it to look. I feel like I got to process it a little bit. And I definitely didn't want it to sneak up on me. I think oftentimes with athletes, you either don't want to face it because it's scary and it's this thing that you love and, you never really want it to end, or it ends suddenly with an injury, or it ends, you're just sometimes just not good enough anymore. So I definitely was cognizant and thoughtful about, even though it's going to be hard and I don't know all the answers, I at least want to be asking the questions and sort of set myself up, and then it happens and you're like, oh my God, nobody told me it was going to be like this. It's hard. And what do I do with my day? And I'm used to having my schedule so, thought out and planned and just sort of told to me, but it really provides a sense of calm and balance and structure. And now I'm, having to sort of figure all of that out on my own, which is fun, but it's also, it was nice to have it done for me as well.
When did you first feel that, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to be all the places I used to be at these times? When was the first day you were like, whoa?
Honestly, I think it was right away. I started to have this constant thing in my head of oh, you just you don't have to do anything. You can just oh, you don't want to work out, or you don't want to, go to this place. You can just say no. And that was such a revelation. I sort of knew it was going to happen, but until you feel it, I was like, oh, this is revelation of I actually get to make all of the decisions, which then puts a lot of responsibility on me. So I'm like, oh, this is kind of uncomfortable too. But I think it was pretty quick into, the first month or so of retirement of like, and people telling me as well and seeing Sue go through it of like, oh, I have to be really thoughtful and intentional about how I want to craft my days and how I want to craft my schedule in order for me to feel good within that. I'm so used to, working out so much and having that physical expenditure of energy and having that sort of like built-in community and people that you see every day and that sort of like balancing, act to the rest of your life. So I feel like it happened pretty quickly. And Sue and I moved out to New York. So we're sort of still between Seattle and New York. So that was all new and fun, but a big transition, as you said.
Well, and you went from being a part of a team, an individual on a team, but as you said, it sounds like you all worked out together and trained together. So then, okay, you're not only moving from a team situation more to the individual, and then, okay, you're transitioning cities. So what did you do? Did you find a gym? Did you find classes? How did you do it?
Well, actually, I had a major injury right at the end of my career, right at the end of my season. I tore my Achilles. So, which was like so dramatic and not something I wanted, but it also provided this like little bit of structure for me in a way. It was, there was a silver lining to it. So I had to, go to my rehab. That was a big part of my structure, especially early on of like, okay, I rehab a couple days a week or I'm supposed to be doing these couple things. But I feel like I'm still figuring it out. Like, when do I like to work out? When do I want to have my working hours? What days do I like to have off? I feel like those little pieces I'm starting to kind of like pull together and starting to feel just in my own body and own mind and own schedule how I like things to flow and what kind of feels healthy and feels best for me.
Do you have a lot of demands coming at you? I mean, given that you do have this platform and people know who you are, and you have been, you've really ramped up your activism over time. Do you have like all these demands? And if so, how do you know what to say no to and what to say yes to?
Yeah, we have a lot of demands.
Both of
we
you.
could work
All the
every
time.
day, all the time. You
Right.
could be doing something, even if it's just friends, especially living in New York City. We know so many people out here, and nothing that's ever presented as like a bad thing or not going to be fun. So I think with work, I've been sort of crafting my no button for a while, especially since 2019, since that World Cup, and so much of my life just sort of changed instantly. But I think I've been, with the team that I work with, amazing people that work with me, of like, it's okay to say no, and it's better really to kind of go deeper instead of wider all the time, because there's only so much energy. And I feel like I'm an energized person. I like to work and I like to get out there, but you just can't really do it all. And then you don't have really the time and creativity and space for the rest of it. But it's hard because there's a lot of asks, and I don't always want to say no, or don't always want to, take time to do other things, but it's sort of getting there.
But so you're having to find your own boundaries to keep, and then also you talked about energy. So talk a little bit more about energy, because you do seem like you have boundless energy, but of course we all have limited energy actually. So how do you know when to say yes or when to say no to something?
I think over the last, 3-4 years especially, if it's at its core, if it doesn't really align with like my mission of, equal pay, equality, racial justice, if it doesn't really align with those things, for the most part, it's kind of like there's a lot of opportunities. We can't do them all, and those are kind of just out a little bit. So even if it's, more financially based or tied or incentivized, at the end of the day, it's like I want to do something sort of meaningful. So that's always kind of my North Star. And I feel really lucky to even have that opportunity and be able to do that. But I also feel like it gives me the opportunity to, again, go deeper with something instead of just saying yes to everything. Some of it is just really just trial and error. And it's like, okay, we're going to try this. Okay, I didn't like that. That took a lot of energy in a bad way. You can tell when something kind of zaps you or not. Some of it is both Sue and I sort of balancing us both being retired at the same time. What does that look like? We're together in spaces a lot more. So how does that play out? And how do we like that interaction? And then a little bit of just gut feeling. I'm like, I either want to or not. I feel like I'm still young and still have a lot of opportunity to make mistakes and try things.
For sure.
really kind of suss out. Because I feel like at the end of my career, I had an idea of what I wanted to get into and sort of what I wanted to do. But until you really kind of put your hands in it and spend time and energy there, you're not really going to know.
When did you know you wanted to be an activist for others?
Oh, gosh. I don't even know if that's something that I really knew. I mean, I think just being a woman in sport, being a woman, period, being a woman in sports, being gay, I think that was really my first kind of like thread to other parts of activism or allyship was like, okay, I understand I'm asking this of people, this is maybe 2000, between 8 and 12, really. I came out in 2012 before the London Olympics, but I think Prop 8 was on the ballot in California. I'm from California, like 2008, 9. So that was kind of happening. I was sort of coming into my consciousness, as a young college student, just kind of like, getting out of a small town and being like, oh, there's such a bigger world, realizing that I was gay. So I kind of understood it at that time. And especially when I came out, I really was asking people in a lot of ways, you don't have to be gay to understand what I'm saying, but you just have to believe me and support me. And I think, further down the track, whether it was kneeling with Colin or equal pay or, a number of different things, that was, to me, always clicked of like, oh, we're all doing the same thing. There's different, sort of flavors of inequality and different types of activism and specific issues that we're talking about. But at the end of the day, you're either asking someone to believe you or you're being put in a position to believe someone else. And I think that always just was like second nature to me. I think my parents instilled that a lot. My mom grew up really poor, and just listening to her, she's always just like, you never know what someone else is going through. And, use whatever sort of station in life that you have to make the world a better place. And so I think, being an athlete and eventually having the platform that I did, playing for the U.S. Men's national team, being able to do so, representing America all the time, I feel like I had a unique opportunity to leverage America against itself a little bit. And now I get to use this platform to try to spread as much good as possible.
Talk about your decision to come out in 2012 before the London Olympics. When you were making that decision, you said you knew this about yourself at a certain point. But the decision to come out versus knowing something is a very different one, to be public. How did you make the decision that you were going to come out and be public? Who did you talk to other people? Was it your family? Was it your sister? How did you have the courage to do that?
I realized pretty much when I got to college that I was gay. And I feel like for me, I mean, looking back, I was like, well, obviously, Megan, this is really not a difficult puzzle to solve. But I didn't struggle with it in the personal sense of like not accepting myself. I feel like once I realized, I was like, the whole world sort of clicked into place. And so that was, I had like a more joyous experience with it. And I know that is not everybody's experience. And I think the decision to come out was part that of like, I have a little bit different story than what's told a lot. I don't have a story full of pain and struggle. And I felt comfortable, being very joyous about it and talking about it openly. And my family was very accepting and the team was very accepting always. And then I think going into the Olympics, I was like consciously kind of like, this is a huge moment. Like this would be the perfect moment to do it. I like leveraging these really important moments. And I feel like it was just like this kind of, I had sort of gotten to the point where I was like, why am I not out? And then this perfect moment of, having a really big stage. And, I think being able to be that voice for people and be something that other, not just kids, but other people could see in general, I felt like was a really powerful thing. And, the way that I like to express myself and just how I am on and off the field, I thought was a little bit different than, the sort of coming out stories that we always hear. It's like, I always say that it's just this gift that keeps on giving. whether it's, seeing people in the stands that, have pink hair, or, seeing a couple, or seeing, parents with a kid who clearly is, some sort of queer or some sort of trying to figure things out. Seeing the amount of athletes since I've come out that have come out, seeing just how much more accepting, the world is and sport is around it. I don't know if it's directly correlated, but I was like, I've been really successful since I've come out, so I'm just going to attribute it to that. It never hurt being yourself. So I feel like it's just this even today, and I've been out for so long, and I feel like it's so much more accepting now, especially around sport, especially around women's sport. But I still get people that come up and say, you made me comfortable with myself, or you made my parents see me in a different way, or, whatever it may be. And I think it's just kind of a little part of that, it's kind of paying it forward as well.
Yeah, because it's been 12 years now.
Yeah.
And when you think about now, how hard it was for people to come out then, or 12 years before that, but when you came out, and then 12 years since, it's almost like we're on this trajectory or this spectrum. And I see you advocating now, not just for people, not just for LGBTQ plus, right? Talk to me about your activism and why you think it's so important to extend it beyond people who are gay.
I mean, I think for me, I just know how important it's been for me to be able to be myself. I know how important that is for me, and how, certain environments that I've been in, it's like you feel when the walls close in or someone's eyes close in on you. It doesn't feel good for anybody in any station in life, gay, straight, trans, or otherwise. But I just think for me, when you let people be themselves, like, not only is that just the right thing to do, and everybody deserves that, but you get the best out of them. You're going to get, especially in a team environment, like if everybody is able to be themselves, they're going to bring their special talent. And I think that of the world as well. That's kind of what we all want, I think. We all know so deeply that we're an individual. We all have that inner world and that inner life. And I think having the grace to extend that to other people, knowing that's exactly what we want. And I think at the end of the day, I know I'm asking for that. I need that, and I want that. And, I want that for everybody else as well.
I think we all long to be fully seen as who we
really
are.
Do.
To own our story, to own who we are as individuals, or how we're growing, or how we're changing. The country hasn't made it easy the last few years, I think, for the kind of activism that you're doing. It feels like sometimes, not everywhere, but sometimes we're moving backwards. What keeps you hopeful during these times? And I hear you talking about having empathy for people who don't understand. Help with both the hope and then the empathy. Where do those come in for you?
Just trying to meet people where they are. I want to be understood also. And, I don't know everything about everybody else. So I think just kind of extending that. And I think the hopeful part, I just look at kids today, and they're like so much further advanced and accepting and, understanding of who they are, and have a greater sense of empathy than I had, certainly at that age. So I put, all the hope in the little ones always. But I also see there's a lot of pain and hurt and suffering, I think, sort of emotionally in our country. And we're being told, these people are bad, or these people are bad, or we're against each other, when really it's like, we're all here together, y'all. Totally. We're all in America together.
Yeah, the more we accept one another. I think sometimes people are going through their own pain or their own hardship in their family or the community, but then they put their anger or their emotions out on other people instead of saying, okay, I'm really the one hurting here, and so let that person be themselves and I'll be myself here.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of like fear-mongering and, sort of othering, and it's like a false sense of security to sort of other someone else. I think immediately pops to mind is like trans kids in sport. So I think it can sort of be made into this big story, but when you really humanize it, it's like Jessica that wants to play volleyball, and she's 11 and she just wants to play with her friends or whoever it is. So I think the kind of like sensationalized version of a lot of, these controversial issues aren't really the truth. I think the thing that we always have is like each other. We always have community.
We have our humanity.
We always have our humanity. At the end of the day, like we're, from a cellular level, like we're social beings. We need other people. And, sort of going back to what I was saying before about us all knowing deeply that we're individual, I think, understanding that and really giving that grace to other people and giving that space to other people just opens up more space for yourself, and really just seeing people for, who they are, taking time to understand other people. Okay, where are they coming from? Why are they saying that? What do they think about me? What are the things that I think about them that are wrong? And really getting curious about each other instead of, just kind of like, oh, I know the answer and I know that I don't like that person. It's like we all have so much more in common than not.
Than we have that's different.
Oh,
I
so
say that
much
to people
more. We have very
all the
little
time.
that's different.
Yeah, I know.
Truly.
Okay, so because of your career, you got to travel the world at a young age, like all through your 20s, right? And because of my foundation career, I had never imagined the places I would go to. What do you think that taught you, being able to travel that much?
Oh, it just smashed my world just wide open to how different but how similar everybody is. Early on, and being able to travel to at such a young age, and all throughout and having different teammates and playing different countries and being exposed to that is just like, wow, how cool is that? I think it was always presented with sports in such a non-threatening way. It was just like, we're going to this place and we get to travel and, see other things. So just seeing the beauty and the difference, and really at the end of the day, we all want to, eat at the night market, and we all want to, walk with our family, and we all want to see something interesting and beautiful, But then I find myself being like, walking slow in the middle of the sidewalk and
seeing what they're seeing for the first time.
Seeing what they're seeing for the first time. And I think just, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and just like taking the difference for beauty instead of something that's scary, I think is really important.
You've spoken about your family, about the importance of your parents, and then your twin sister, but also your brother who had drug addiction. And I think of so many Americans now are touched by drug addiction, right? We are facing it as a
very
country.
Much.
Again, what got you comfortable in your brother and your family about you talking out about that issue? And why was it important to you to do that?
I don't know if they were always comfortable with me talking about it. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything, but I'd probably have more conversations. But, I was 25, so I obviously knew everything.
Of course.
At that point. I think, again, the way that it tied all of these different topics together. I learned so much about addiction and so much about, being in addiction. And so even just my own journey, being so mad at my brother, being so hurt. I was young. I was really, he was in the prison system and he was in active addiction, and just being like, he can just stop, and not understanding that, being so hurt, and then realizing like, okay, well, that's not how addiction works at all. Certainly not opioid addiction. And learning how the criminal justice system works and the inequities there, and, understanding how racism works in the criminal justice system, and how healthcare works, and how, punitive care doesn't really work for active addiction. Like, that's not going to be so that he needs care and love and help. And so I think all of that, I really started to sort of tie these threads together, the sort of like intersectionality of inequality, being gay and him being in prison, active addiction, and starting to learn, a lot more about racism and how it all interacts. I feel like it just, similar to me figuring out that I was gay, kind of this aha moment. I feel like the more that I just observed him and watched him and learned from him, like the more he gave me. I think so often we look at people who are struggling with active addiction as like, you're just the problem and you have all of the work to do. And it's like, that's just another flawed human. We all have our flaws, and there's varying ranges of it. But I think being able to really see the humanity in him and see, like, life is painful at times and life is complicated and doesn't always go, exactly the way we want. But I think like starting to understand these sort of bigger institutional, structures and how they interact with each other was like an education all in of itself for me.
Where does courage come from for you?
I think my mom's ancestral side is like some just, I don't know, they probably had a kingdom at some point.
Badass women?
The badass women. Just like, I don't know. There's some like generational stuff going on that side. I mean, even just the stories of her mother and her grandmother. And her grandmother has some epic stories. She had, I don't know, probably like 12 kids. Her husband died pretty early. She ran a huge farm by herself, like did everything. Even just looking at my mom, I always tell her that she's breaking generational curses, and she like kind of gets what I'm saying, but like not, I'm saying it like a new age sort of woo-woo way. And she's like, I kind of get it, but like her courage and like, the life that she has provided for all of her kids was just so much better and so much different than she had. And I think we come from much more of a matriarchal family as well, which is, totally opposite of the world really structure that we live in. And so even before I had the language or had those words, that was my sort of model. My parents both had like very even gender roles. They both worked. They both did, homework, housework, baths, all the things. So that was sort of normal. So I think then growing up and kind of getting into the world, that is what feels right to me. And just having her be, this badass figure in my life, I think, as long as I'm making her proud.
So you carry her inside
always,
of you.
yeah.
Earlier, I interviewed the filmmaker Ava DuVernay, and she basically said the same thing. She comes from a very matriarchal family, and so these things that she's had the courage to do in her filmmaking, it's just for her kind of a given because of how she grew up. Which I would say for me has been a bit different because I definitely grew up more in the sort of male hierarchy, where my parents love one another totally. They're still alive. I'm still very close to them. But, my dad was the one out working. My mom was at home until later they started a business together. And I think I was in the tech industry where males really dominated and still do, right?
Yeah.
And so, you hit these barriers. I hit barriers quickly in my 20s that maybe I wouldn't have been up against in some other careers. But you learn from those, right?
Very much so. I mean, I think you got to make the best of whatever situation you're sort of given and handed.
Talk to me about the importance of joy in your life. Like, where does it show up? Do you think about it much?
I think about it all the time. Joy is like, I think, such an important part of me and sort of like how I even just like communicate to the world and how I show up. It was such a big part of who I was as a player as well. I feel like in some ways joy is like this reward for going through all the hard and struggling in a lot of ways, to the sort of public-private part. Like we struggle just like everybody else, and we have, the hard parts. And in sports, is you got to do all the hard work in order to go out there and be free and, show that side. But I think that's such an important part for me, at least, of like how I show up in the world and how I communicate. And, I think especially later in my career, I was kind of known as a person who's going to like say the hard thing and, do that. But I think the balance of joy that I brought with it was humanizing. I think for me too, like I don't want to just be a microphone, blaring at people. Like I want people to see me and see, how the world is interacting with me, and maybe that, opens something up for someone else. But I mean, we only get one life, and it's, on balance, it's very short in the whole grand scheme. And like, I've, been very lucky to live a really, really incredible life, and I'm gonna enjoy it, and I'm gonna, express myself in it and really be, grateful and thankful for all the joy that I have and all the things that I'm able to do. It's very like rare and lucky. I feel really lucky to be who I am and, to kind of been plopped down in the situation that I'm in.
And I have to say, I'm so excited to see how you continue with your activism. And I do think you're just a huge inspiration, both to your generation and those coming up behind you. So thanks for this conversation.
Thank you. And happy early birthday.
Thank you. I'm excited about turning 60.
You should be. That's like, hell yeah. You made it to 60.
Made
You're
it
looking
this far.
great.
Hey,
Yeah, made
keep
it this
going.
far. You're looking good. You're doing your thing. Just living. I love that.
Thanks for this.
Yeah, thank you.